Dr. Mary Cleave. So, you have a book about your life?
I do. This is a book that was written by Muriel Schloss. It's called Mary Cleave, Astronaut. It's from a series of books, actually, about a number of different women that had careers like a veterinarian or a geologist. And I worked with Muriel when I was getting ready for my second space flight. She came down to Johnson and followed what I did. And then she wrote it up in this book. You know, she was really fun to work with. She's a good author, I think. And we had an enjoyable time working on it.
Is it weird? Is it weird, like, saying a book, oh, there's my name in a book?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird having a book about you, but it's also fun because sometimes I do workshops with girls that are interested in engineering. Like last year I did one at the University of Maryland. And it's always fun when you have girls come up to you and say, I read about you in middle school, and that's why I'm going to be an engineer. Something like that. It makes you feel really good. So it is weird, but it's worth it. So
It could also be cool because you get to see other people's opinions of you. Most of the time when they write a book, most of the time it's like good opinions and stuff.
yeah, well, I would hope, yeah, this was a good opinion. So yeah, you're right. I would think it would be very painful to have a bad opinion book about you.
So can you tell us about some of the things in the book?
Well, it was about my second space flight, so it's about getting ready. And my job on that flight was deploying a spacecraft that went to Venus called Magellan. There were 5 of us on the crew. And the interesting thing about this flight, there were all 4 of us had flown before, and then there was one rookie, Mark Lee. So we were on the deployed team together, and he had never flown in space before. So I said, Mark, for ascent and entry, for going up and coming down, which one do you want on the flight deck? Because there were 5 of us, only 4 could fit on the flight deck, so somebody had to be by themselves down on the mid-deck. So he wanted to fly upstairs for ascent. So I was all by myself down on the mid-deck for ascent, and I couldn't see anything, and I thought it was going to be a really bad deal. But I talked to the commander, red flash, and I said, you know, I want to turn my mic off and just enjoy the ride. And if you tell me to come up, I'll turn my mic back on. And he goes, that's fine. So I turned my mic off, and when the spacecraft lit off, well, you can feel the spacecraft go back, and then you come forward, and then you get a big kick in the bottom of your seat, because that's where the engines light off, and then you start taking off. And my first flight, I was a flight engineer, and I was so busy working, I had absolutely no idea what was going on around me, because I was really concentrating on the data and stuff and my job. For this one, I didn't have anything to do. I had an altimeter, and if we had to bail out of the spacecraft, I had to blow the hatch and do a number of things to get everybody out of the spacecraft. But, you know, since nothing goes wrong, you didn't have anything to do, I just had a great ride. And it was so much fun. I could feel the spacecraft turn upside down, and then for the 8.5 minutes till we got to orbit, it was just the best ride. Better than anything at Disneyland, definitely. So that was great.
So you want to compare it to a roller coaster?
To a roller coaster? Not even close. I mean, because in a roller coaster, you're outside and stuff. And in this, you're in a spacesuit. You know, you're even in a pressure suit. But it's, well, in a roller coaster, you don't go from 0 to 25 times the speed of sound in 8 minutes. And that's what you get to do in a rocket. So that's a lot better, I think.
Are the spacesuits like really heavy?
They're very heavy. Those pressure suits, oh, we don't have them on here. But the pressure suits, those orange things that you wear out, they're pretty heavy, pretty uncomfortable. And you have to wear a diaper underneath it.
I saw that picture on the back. Can you tell us about it?
This is the crew. This is a picture of our crew. And that's for my first space flight. So that's Jerry and Woody and Charlie. These guys, all of the flight crew, they were all flight test engineers except for me. And then I was an environmental engineer. And then Charlie's another engineer. Well, we were all engineers. Let me just put it that way. So it was career-wise, if you want to go to space, being an engineer is a big deal.
So you felt like you enjoyed your second flight more than your first one?
You know, I can't really pick which one was better than the second one because each one was so different. My jobs were so different. And just on the second flight, I knew exactly what to expect. And on the first flight, everything was a great surprise. So you know, it's nice to know what to expect, but it's also nice to discover new things. But it's really a different experience, so it's hard to compare them. I like them both.
Well, one thing good about that book, Dr. Cleave, is that you're a woman in a spacesuit. It shows that not only men can be an astronaut. You prove that women can be whatever they want to be.
Well, thanks. I think it was great having women in space suits, and I think women belong in space. They do.
So, Dr. Cleave, how can we get this book? Is it still available?
Yes, this book still is available, and you can get it through the contact information on the screen.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
I'm Dr. Mary Cleave, and I'd like to say hello. We have a lot of interesting things going on when it comes to careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, and it's really exciting to be able to share some of them with you. This is a very exciting career for kids, any kid, but in particular we'd like to encourage girls to think about being an engineer or a scientist, because it's really a fun career. I worked for over 30 years as an engineer, and I can't think of anything I could do that would have been more fun than what I did, and what I'm still doing, in fact. So it's really a great thing to consider. So I'm going to show you some clips. Come on with me on the trip.
That was one of the crew pictures we took that kind of said what everybody was going to do on the mission.
Being led out really by mission specialist Norm Thagard, Mark Lee, Mary Cleave, and the commander and pilot, Commander Dave Walker waving, and pilot Ron Graby waving. T-minus 15, 14, 13, and liftoff.
1,000 feet per second. Atlantic 2 miles downrange.
Brewster and Brian and Murray in the flight deck. They're preparing for the first of the 2 spacewalks. 3 of us, Murray, Woody and myself, dubbed ourselves the Ace Construction Company with the supporting crew of the rest of the crew, and we put up our advertisement after we'd completed the construction of the first access truss.
The arm flies wonderfully. It's just such a great tool. Real smooth and no surprises. Being able to interact with them, and they gave me some real good directions while we were up there.
Mary took most of these motion picture earth views that we've got, and this is one way she did it.
We had a mid-deck experiment called a fluid experiment apparatus, which you can see here. My hands are inside of this. It's a little furnace. We were growing indium crystals. It was really an excellent mid-deck for us. We controlled it with our little experiment computer, which worked great, different floppy disks for each experimental run.
Here's Mary at the overhead windows. This is our primary vantage point for Earth observation photography.
Yeah, I sort of shared doing the food cooking duties. Whoever got hungry first seemed to be the person that would end up cooking. But it's actually a lot easier in 0G going up the stairs. In 1G you have to be careful and take the trays one at a time, these bags, before we unpack them. You can see it took up a lot of space down here. A lot of times at work I feel like I'm running around in circles, and so I tried actually running around in circles, and it worked up there, and it was a lot of fun.
Walker.
Hi, welcome back to Teen Scene. I'm here with Dr. Cleave. So, Dr. Cleave, since your childhood, since when have you wanted to be an astronaut?
Wow, well, when I was a little girl, all the astronauts were old guys with crew cuts. And so I didn't really ever think about being an astronaut when I was a kid. And in fact, I had already graduated from college and was in graduate school when NASA started hiring scientists and engineers to go work in space. And they were advertising in all the different post offices, because this was before the internet. And found out about that, and found out you could fly in a space shuttle and in 238 jets, and I thought, boy, that's a job for me. So that was the first time I really thought about it. But I think it's different now for people like you. You can think about doing all sorts of different things, because there aren't the restriction on women that there used to be when I was your age. So it's great, I think.
What were some of your steps to being an astronaut?
Well, when you first get hired, you go down there and you have to train for about a year. And you're sort of in training. You're not really hired yet. They take a year before they really hire you, so they look at you real carefully. And during that year, you can decide you don't want to do it, or they can decide that they don't think you're fit for the job. And during that year, for the first 6 months, there are a lot of classes. And a lot of the classes you teach each other. Like I helped the guys, excuse me, a lot with chemistry and some of the science courses. And most of them were test pilots, so they taught me a lot about aeronautics, that kind of stuff. And then the last half is on-the-job training, so you get assigned to various jobs in support of the guys that are flying in space or getting ready to fly in space, and you learn from your job just like you do on most jobs. So it's an interesting year.
How has like engineering influenced you?
Being an engineer has helped me a lot because it really trained me to look at data and then try to collect the best data I could, take a really careful look at it, and then make the best decision I could. And so it really helped me figure out how to make decisions, which is a very important part of life. And sometimes they're hard to do. And you have to learn that sometimes your decisions aren't going to be right, and you got to figure out how to fix it and then move on from there. So it's good for all of those reasons, I think. And it taught me how to do homework, lots of homework.
How cool was it to work like in this field? Like how cool is that to work?
Well, it's a great job because you get paid to go fly in T-38s, you get paid to go fly in the space shuttle. It's a great job if you like to travel, because you travel a lot. Yes, all the time, and so it's the ideal job for me in the sense that you do a lot of work in school, you try to get ready for a career, and if you find the right career for yourself, you do that job whether you get paid or not. So, and that's really what you want to do. You want to figure out a way to get yourself a job that you do whether you got paid or not. And for me, that was being an astronaut. I would have done that job whether they paid me or not. But don't tell them they didn't have to pay me because I needed the money. So.
How did you feel when you knew you were the first person to engineer and operate the robot on space?
I was not the first person to do that job, but I was the only person on my crew to do that job. And it was, yeah, I mean, we always have a backup, but I was the primary person to do it. So it was a really interesting job. I had never been working that closely with robotics before, and I got really, really interested in robotics because of that job. So interested in robotics that when I left the astronaut corps, I actually changed from human spaceflight into robotic spaceflight and worked with robotic spacecraft for the rest of my career. So for me, that one job made a huge difference.
So you've been an astronaut since 1980?
I was an astronaut from 1980 until 1991, and I retired when I moved up to Goddard and started working on robotic spacecraft.
Can you tell us about some more of your experience?
In space?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I flew 2 space flights, and the first one was, I was a flight engineer, and I operated the arm, and then I grew crystals for 3M, and we had a lot of fun. One of my crewmates, Rodolfo Niribello, was from Mexico, so we got to go to Mexico on our post-flight and learned a lot about that country, and that was really interesting. On my second space flight, we sent another spacecraft called Magellan, a big planetary robotic spacecraft, to Venus. And that spacecraft explored Venus and then eventually burned up on re-entry into the Venusian atmosphere.
Wow.
So that was really interesting, and I got to work with the guys from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena on that one, and working with them was very interesting too. See, that was another robotic spacecraft, so that's why I got interested.
Does it ever get intimidating that you're a woman in this business?
Does it ever get intimidating? Well, I think I just got used to being the only woman in the room. I mean, that for me was about the way it was. In fact, the one change was when I got into the Corps, I was in the second class of women that entered the astronaut Corps. The first class came in 2 years ahead of me. And in that class, there was another female engineer named Judy Resnick. And when I got hired into the Corps, Judy called me while I was still in Utah at my old job and said, I'm so glad there's going to be another female engineer, and let me know how I can help you and all that kind of stuff. And she mentored me right up until she was killed in the Challenger accident. So it was great. At that point in time, that was the one time that I really felt like I wasn't the only woman. And I found it really, really helpful to have other women to share experiences with and commiserate with and complain with, all that kind of stuff. talking about women in this field and men in this field of science, I mean, I want you to close your eyes. Okay. Can you tell me, what do you envision when you envision a scientist?
I envision somebody like Albert Einstein.
It's a good choice.
I envisioned that too, like with the lab coat and the goggles and stuff like
Guy number 2?
I envisioned the guy in the lab coat in the lab, like working on something.
Guy number 3?
I envisioned a guy working on chemicals and pouring them to make different.
So what I get out of this is, I mean, there's been a lot of progress with women in science, but we still have a long way to go because you guys all thought about men, right? And you all could be scientists just like I am, so we still have a lot of progress. You got work on your hands, you got stuff to do. You know?
So we all saw the video. It was really cool. Do any of you guys have any questions or comments?
that. Well, my favorite part about it was like the whole gravity thing and how like you were floating in some parts. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, weighing nothing is a lot of fun. It really is. In fact, when you get back on the ground, you sort of feel like you can't believe your face isn't just pulled down because it's such a huge force, but you don't understand that because you've always had it on you. You don't understand how much force you have pressing down on you all the time. So,
My favorite part, well, I thought it was cool how you operated that arm.
oh yeah, flying the arm in space was fun. Really, and especially when I had Woody and Jerry on the end of it, because they had to be nice to me, because, you know, I could flick my wrist and they would be lost in space. So they were really very nice to me before I had them on the end of the arm.
How did you like eat Thanksgiving dinner in like space? Like, don't you just want to like sit down? Like,
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you can sit on the floor, or you sit on the walls, or you're sitting on the ceiling. So we ate Thanksgiving dinner up in space, and you know, sitting on the ceiling, and you know, sitting on the walls, and it was really great. I mean, the food's not fabulous because it's like camping out. You know, it's freeze-dried food. You know, but they do the best they can, and you're only up for a week, so it's really not that bad. But we did have irradiated turkey and cranberry sauce from Ocean Spray, you know, all that kind of stuff. So really, it was fun. We had a good time.
Well, the video was really cool, but did you have any doubts when you were in space?
Any doubts? You know, you train so long to go to space. Your only doubt is really, please let us launch, because you know a lot of times you're out at the launch pad and you slip. You know, you can't launch the day you're supposed to launch, and then you're already in quarantine, so you got to sit around and wait for your launch. So you really, your biggest worry is that you're not going to get off the pad, and then you have to wait until you can go. So,
is it like when you're in space and you know how you have less gravity?
Mm-hmm.
Well, is it kind of like I don't know how to explain it. Like you're in like a spacesuit, and then you know those little doors where they blow you up in the air and you weigh less.
Yeah.
Like that. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, it's just like that, where if you're in one of those, you know, areas where they have the wind, the fans
Yeah,
pulling
that's
out.
what I'm
Yep,
talking about.
it's a lot like that, except you don't have the wind resistance, so it's even easier. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you like jump around on the spaceship? That was it.
Yeah, and you can just do any number of flips, but you have to be very careful because if you get stuck in the middle of the room and you can't touch anything and you stall out, then you're stuck there and you feel like an idiot. You gotta say, "Can somebody come get me?" You know? So you don't want to do that. So you got to make sure you push off so you can make it to whatever side you're going to.
Was it ever difficult, like with the gravity, to like do things and stuff like that?
Yeah, it is, because particularly when you first get up on orbit, you're really biased to a 1G, a 1 gravity environment, because this is what we live in. So you're used to always having an up and a down, okay? And you're oriented that way, but so you get used to, like, the panels that you're working on, you're used to always having up and seeing them this way. And then you get in space and you're looking at them from the top down, from the side, because it does make a difference. And it takes you about a day or two to be able to really feel comfortable that you know where the switches are and stuff, because you're coming at it from different orientations. And when you look out the window, you're used to looking at maps with north up. And in a spaceship, that's not how it works. And so all of a sudden, you're cranking around to trying to figure out where you are, and you can see for the first couple of days, everybody's trying to put north up, and then after you're up for a couple of days, you lose that bias, and you're okay. You can recognize places without putting north up. So So it takes you a while, but you gotta get rid of your old biases in a new place. It's sort of like any other thing you do, you know.
All right, well, hold that thought. We'll go to a quick break and be right back.
Brewster and Brian and Murray in the flight deck. They're preparing for the first of the two spacewalks. Three of us, Murray, Woody and myself, dubbed ourselves the Ace Construction Company with the supporting crew of the rest of the crew, and we put up our advertisement after we'd completed the construction of the first access truss.
The arm flies wonderfully. It's just such a great tool. Real smooth and no surprises. Being able to interact with them, and they gave me some real good directions while we were up there.
Mary took most of these motion picture earth views that we've got, and this is one way she did it.
We had a mid-deck experiment called a fluid experiment apparatus, which you can see here. My hands are inside of this. It's a little furnace. We were growing indium crystals. It was really an excellent mid-deck for us. We controlled it with our little experiment computer, which worked great, different floppy disks for each experimental run.
Here's Mary at the overhead windows. This is our primary vantage point for Earth observation photography.
Yeah, I sort of shared doing the food cooking duties. Whoever got hungry first seemed to be the person that would end up cooking. But it's actually a lot easier in 0G going up the stairs. In 1G, you have to be careful and take the trays one at a time, these bags, before we unpack them. You can see it took up a lot of space down here. A lot of times at work, I feel like I'm running around in circles, and so I tried actually running around in circles, and it worked up there, and it was a lot of fun.
Walker?
Well, welcome back. Does anyone have any last thoughts?
How did it feel being up in space?
It was great because it was something that I had worked for years and years and years. So it just felt wonderful. But I mean, a lot of people might be afraid. I mean, are any of you afraid?
I'm terrified of planes. I don't like riding in airplanes and stuff. Like, I start to cry on takeoff.
Yeah.
So how do you handle, like, are you scared of flying?
No, in fact, you're like my sister. My sister, she says that she got the anxiety genes for the both of us because I'm not afraid of anything. You know, so you have certain people have different personalities. So you're like my sister, and she doesn't like flying in airplanes, and she prefers to stay on the ground.
And I feel like I was born on the ground, and I shall die
On the ground. Okay. Well, she's a psychotherapist, so you might want to look into that for a career. So.
Well, if there was like any last statement or anything for you to say, what would you give us advice for?
Try to find a job that you really want to do. And I think everybody's a little different. You can tell we're all a little different. And so you just sort of have to find where you fit. And they're all fun, but it's important to find where you fit in the cosmos. It's a big place. There are a lot of options.
So what were some of the obstacles that you overcame to get where you are now?
I think a lot for me was involved with how limited the options were for women when I was your age. When I started flying when I was 14, I was really interested in airplanes when I was your age, and I soloed at 16, had a private license at 17. I grew up in New York, New York City, so you had to be 18 to drive. So for a year, my mother, had to drive me to the airport so I could fly people in an airplane. It's a little different. So I wanted a career in aviation, but at that point, women weren't pilots. I mean, if you wanted a career in aviation and you were a woman, you were an airline stewardess. When I graduated from college, I went to apply to be an airline stewardess, and I was 2 inches too short. So they said I couldn't do it. Yeah, you had to be 5'4", and I was 5'2". So I ended up going on to graduate school, and I became, an engineer and got my graduate degrees and stuff, and always liked flying in airplanes, but didn't think I could have a career in aviation. And then there was a lot of work done by women, but everybody, but women in particular, trying to get a law passed called Title IX. And when that law passed, it said you can't discriminate on the basis of gender. And what that did was, when NASA went to advertise for shuttle astronauts, they had to open it up to women. And so I was able to apply and get in. So I went, within that 10-year period, I went from being too short to be an airline stewardess to becoming an astronaut. And 10 years and a law change can do a lot, so.
Height can really affect a lot of things.
Height can affect a lot of things.
I'm like the shortest one in my school.
I was always the shortest one in my school, too. And when I applied for the astronaut position, when they asked me, why do you think we should hire you? I said, I'll give you a full-size brain for half the payload price. And they liked it, so.
What was some of your stories like back in like middle school about like your horror stories and things?
My horror stories. Well, I was pretty shy when I was a kid, and I didn't really ever feel like I fit in that well. I don't know why. I was just really shy. And then, so I always found a little niche at the gym. And I liked sports, and I liked being active. So I became very active in sports in junior high school and started playing on the lacrosse team and the field hockey team. Played volleyball, basketball. In middle school, I could play on all those teams, even though I was always the shortest one. But then when you got to high school, things got serious. So, you know, got kicked off the volleyball team. So I helped, you know, as a line judge, you know, and didn't get on the basketball team, so I helped, you know, in other ways. But lacrosse and field hockey were fine, so I kept playing those. And I played them in college, too.
Wow.
I hid in the gym. That's how I survived. I think a lot of kids hide in the gym. And team sports help you. They help you figure out how to work with your peers. And I found that really helped me all the way through my career. Because engineers, you have to, you know, complex problems, you work on teams. You know, and in space, you know, on a crew, you're definitely working on a team. So those team sport skills I learned were very helpful.
Did you have any other problems with like teachers or other students?
Teachers and other students.
Like
Boys?
Bullies and stuff.
Bullies? You know, I don't remember any bullies. I remember kids that were mean. You know, you always have the mean guys. You know, they're just mean. I don't know, if, you know, maybe you'd call them bullies, but they were mean guys, yeah. And you know, they tried to make you feel bad because I think it made them feel better if you felt bad. Never could figure that one out. And as for teachers, like I can think of a couple teachers I had that were incredible. I had a physics teacher called Dr. Love, and he would always get in trouble with the principal because he'd have us out in the halls throwing balls and doing our calculations and stuff. It was really a lot of fun. So I was lucky. I had some really great teachers.
Do you have any advice for us in like middle school and high school?
Find what you enjoy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sports. I mean, you know, I know kids that were really good at debating, or you know, anything like that. Just find something that you enjoy doing, and pursue that because it gives you a break from all your studies, and it also gives you friends that you share a common interest with, and that's all important. And remember, it's only 3 or 4 years. You're going to survive.
Well, the contact information is on the screen, and it has been very nice meeting you.